Welcome to Mountview Live. I'm Giles. I hope you're well. How are we doing? I hope you and yours are very well. Now, this is a very particular moment. Very few times in history have so much of the world been affected by the same event. Time of massive uncertainty, but also a time of opportunity. And as we, as artists and actors, have a task, which is to reflect the human experience, so we must be, I think, even more prepared and ready now to answer that challenge. So I wanted to create this environment where we could come together, young students, not so young students, where we could come together, talk, share, challenge each other, and hopefully you will leave these conversations a little bit more inspired to go out and answer the challenges that we're all facing. This week's guest. Okay, where do we start with this week's guest? Okay, he is a multi-Tony Award winner. He is an Olivier Award winner. He is a Grammy Award winner. He is a Pulitzer Prize winner. He's a Kennedy Center Award nominee, award winner. He's done it all. He's also someone who I am very, very grateful to, and grateful for all the things that have been happening in my life in the last few years. So I would like you, class, to help me welcome very much my very good friend, Mr. Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Woohoo! Hi, everybody!
Whoa, this music.
I figured it could help if it came up.
How are you? How are you?
I'm okay. I am, because my office is my son's classroom and my wife is using her office, I'm relegated to the least showy third room in our house for this thing, but I lugged over my keyboard so that we could talk about anything that came up. One of my favorite things is talking to students, so thanks for the opportunity. I always say I feel like I had a 5-year advantage on my contemporaries in musical theater because I met Tommy Kail so soon. The hardest thing is finding the people who believe in what you're doing and can help you make it better and keep you accountable. The best thing about those years was every week Tommy said, let's meet every Friday. And some days you'll bring in stuff and some days you won't, but we're gonna meet every Friday. And so he knew I needed deadlines to create. And by creating this informal weekly meeting, I brought stuff in and I was always working because I knew I'd be talking to Tommy about something that Friday. And so finding your community and holding yourselves accountable for creating work is the hardest thing because no one's asking you to make it. And yet to have a calling card in the world, you've got to have something to show for it. You can't just say, I'm incredibly talented, trust me. Yeah. Tommy gets an enormous amount of credit of sort of creating a way where there was no way.
Something I always say to like our students is like, if you have an idea or you have that voice in your head that says, this is something I should do, then you should, you've got to commit to that. You've got to listen to that. Would you agree?
When I have an idea and it doesn't leave you alone, because you have ideas all the time. Oh, that would be cool. But if they're the idea that's still bothering you in the shower, if they're the thing you wake up thinking about, if they're the thing you wake up when you're walking your dog and you're supposed to be doing your work or thinking about what you're going to do for your kid's vacation and you come back to this idea. If the idea doesn't leave you alone, it's worth pursuing. And you have to honor that because, you know, otherwise the world doesn't get it. We don't get to experience it.
So In the Heights has given a voice to the Latino community that it never had before. And Hamilton is known for very diverse casts. And I wanted to know, was it always your intention to shed a light on underrepresented communities? Did you encounter any resistance in doing so? And how has the mainstream musical industry changed by your action?
As I learned more about the musical theater canon, this awakening of, if you don't write it, like your dream show doesn't exist. Your dream show doesn't exist yet. You know, I've told this story before as well. When I was a senior in high school, there was a musical by Paul Simon called The Cape Man that opened on Broadway. That was also about Puerto Rican gang members in the 1950s. It was based on a true life incident and starred Ruben Blades and Mark Anthony, and died after 61 performances. And to me, that was the ultimate wake-up call of, hey, like, if anyone was going to write your dream show, it's that group of talent. And they didn't. And no one's going to write your dream show. And so in the Heights, part of the DNA that went into that was, can we not be gang members in the 1950s? Like, can we just be people?
Did you feel there was a need for a new style of musical theatre to be introduced? And if so, is that what inspired you to start writing works such as Hamilton and In the Heights?
Jonathan Larson did not invent putting rock music in musicals, but he did end the argument over whether they had a place in musical theater. It just was a given. It wasn't, whoa, they're telling the story of Jesus through rock and roll. What a gimmick. To me, I'm the same age as hip hop music, so it was never not in my life. And it was not so much I felt musicals needed to change, but I needed to bring the kind of music I loved to the form. What's wonderful about musical theater is also what's wonderful about hip hop is it absorbs what is in the air for its purposes. You know, whether it's the Gershwins writing jazz in the last century, or it's Tom Kitt writing Next to Normal, which is a rock musical where no one is playing rock. It's just the musical vocabulary of the show without apology or comment. That show can exist in the way it did because Rent ended the conversation. And my hope is that, you know, even before Hamilton opened on Broadway and even after the success of Heights, there were still podcasts and think pieces of, does hip hop have a place on Broadway? And there was a Tupac musical that happened that sort of came and went. And my hope is that Hamilton has ended that conversation, in that it's an incredible musical form with its own internal rules and its own attributes that blends beautifully with musical theater storytelling. And so, and it's written, from my perspective, from a love of both traditional musical theater and hip hop. There's as many Jason Robert Brown, Rodgers and Hammerstein references in Hamilton as there are Notorious B.I.G., Mobb Deep. It's everything I love. It's the kitchen sink. So the long answer to your question is, I have to write from a place of the kind of music I love, and that's what ends up on stage and in the score. And I have eclectic tastes, so it's an eclectic score.
So we've kind of already touched on this, but you are involved in all different parts of the industry, from acting to writing to composing. And I'm just wondering, how important do you feel it is that actors are able to create their own work? And are there any top tips that you have for developing that?
Man, it's so hard being an actor. It is so hard being at the mercy of being right for someone else's dream. And you have to be so good at that that you finally get to pick the things that align with your way of thinking, hopefully after a certain point. And so much of the time. And so if you can write, you should write. And if you have friends who can write, you should stay friends with those folks who can write. And also be there for them in a very real way. Like, I can tell you that, you know, you see the same actors and actresses popping up in my work again and again and again. And it's not because we're such great friends. It's because I know if I hand them the ball, they'll run with it and they'll give me even more ideas to make the character sharper and better and stronger. When I say find your tribe, it means writers, it means directors, it means designers, it means stage managers. You know, if you find those community, do that script reading for your friend. If your friend wants to do a table read around his house over muffins, like, show up to that reading. Like, I still do a lot of that. That's an important part of being there, because then also when any of you has an opportunity, you guys can lift each other up. And it's so much more gratifying.
Thinking about slightly after this all happens and what's next, you know, once our industries recover Thinking back to when you were not only as a creative but as an actor were in the Heights and in Hamilton, what was your way to bring your mind and body focused into something that is, you know, such a long run, you know, as a young performer, to prepare for that kind of something like that to take on?
Oh, well, the long run question is a really good one and a really practical one, because I had a crash course in it. I was like many of you, your longest run is 2 weekends. And to go from that to 8 shows a week on a practical level was a real crash course. I did the first few weeks off adrenaline that this thing I'd spent my 20s writing was actually happening. And then one day I think I had coffee and a muffin and tried to get through In the Heights that day. And suddenly everything is very sweaty and everyone's going gray. And I realized, oh, I have no idea how to train my body for this. And I met with a diet expert who told me, this is the minimum number of calories you need to be able to do the amount of dancing and singing and acting you're doing on a 2-show day. So that was the beginning of my education, was like really becoming regimented about my diet during a run and understanding I'm putting these things in my body. They allow me to have this fuel to get through this performance.
Your work has woken up an era of musical theatre and broken down societal preconceptions with a political message. We've already touched on this, but in your opinion, what will be the role of art, musical theatre in a post-COVID-19 world? And are you tempted to write a musical based on the repercussions of this current climate that we find ourselves in?
I don't know how much to speak to the post-COVID world because no one knows what that looks like yet. I can tell you how much this COVID situation has sort of shown the world how much we need art to live. Imagine your lockdown without your books or your music or your TV or your Netflix or your vinyl albums or whatever it is to make time make sense in this time. We'd all have gone insane without it. And so I think this lockdown has brought into stark relief how much the arts make life better as illumination, as distraction, as catharsis, as exercises in empathy. We're all filling the hours with art in a way that we never have before.
I was busy doing the workshop for Everybody's Talking About Jamie, and I gotten a call from my agent saying that I had an audition for In the Heights, so I lost my mind because I was such a massive fan of the show anyways. So the Sunday of kind of the week that I was doing the workshop was my audition day, which was crazy. So I've done a couple of days in this workshop and now I've got to go and audition, and it was kind of like over the course of a couple of hours throughout the day. Went in, did a dance round, and then had a recall to sing, and then had to do some rapping. I think it feels like such a long time ago. And then I believe I found out the next day, if not a couple of days after that, I got the job, which was crazy to me. That was like my first kind of, oh my gosh, professional on stage. This is really happening. Like I can finally, like this is actually, my career is kind of starting now. But obviously it was with our incredible UK creative team. So there wasn't, in terms of the show being tied to America, it wasn't really tied in that kind of sense. Like we didn't have rehearsals with Tommy and Andy and Alex and Lynn. We kind of had our own team, and we were kind of just like a big group of almost fans of the show. And then you're kind of like, wow, we're kind of trying to hold on to or uplift this legacy that's already been created with a show that had been known by so many people at that point. So yeah, that was kind of getting into it. And then during the process of that, I remember meeting Tommy Cale during previews for In the Heights. I met Alex the day before my Hamilton audition, and Lynn was there on my final night of the show. So the night that I was finishing In the Heights, Lynn was then there. And I remember coming up to that point, and there was so much uncertainty whether he was gonna make it to see the show, and it was just crazy. And then eventually he actually came to see the show, and it was nuts performing his kind of piece in front of him, having never spoken to him prior to that, having never met him prior to that. All of a sudden he's sat in the audience and I'm on stage doing a show that he wrote. So that for me was really nuts. And then a lot happened to get past that point.
So my journey to Hamilton wasn't totally straightforward, because I actually auditioned for the original cast first. And at the time when I was auditioning, it wasn't like for a definite part. I mean, obviously it was one of the sisters or part of the ensemble, but nothing was really definite. So it was sort of, I was learning all the sister songs and all the material. And I think at the time I was doing Book of Mormon at the same time, I think, which would have been you guys know, what year, 2014?
Something like that.
Something like that, maybe 2015.
I kind of erased it.
Yeah. So I had a lot of, learned all the material and all that. And I think I got through that first time to like the one before the final, which was a dance call. I don't remember much about the dance call. I remember Andy being there, and Steph, his assistant choreographer, being there. But I just remember it was all a blur and I just fell apart and it was a nightmare. So I actually got cut after that. And I was gutted because I just loved the show, the soundtrack, everything about it. But, I was just like, okay, not my time. And I just carried on with Mormon. And then I did a couple of shows after that. And then when it was recasting, I was like, okay, let's just go for it. Hopefully it'll happen this time. And this time I was auditioning. What was I auditioning for this time? Angelica I was auditioning for. And then potentially cover as Woman 5. I went through all the rounds. My final ended up being just me, with Gregory Haney in a room doing my dance call, which was like the most terrifying experience, doing a dance call on your like you get used to having a group of people like around, so you can like peripheral vision, look what everyone else is doing, but when it's just you and someone there's literally nowhere to hide. So it's just me and him, and he was wonderful because he is wonderful, and they're patient and stuff, and it went well. So I ended up getting offered Woman 5, who's part of the ensemble, and first cover Angelica, and then second cover Eliza and Peggy Mariah, which I just loved. Getting to do all three sisters was just incredible, and something I'd never thought. It's like similar to what Cleve was saying about when you're a fan of a show and you get used, you listen to the soundtrack. Like I knew all the songs, and it never, when it first came out, it never crossed my mind that I would be on stage singing those songs that I'd listened to over and over again. So getting to do Satisfied and Helpless and Say No to This, it's just, it was incredible. So I'm really thankful, actually, in the end, that I got to cover all those three. And I quite like, that it doesn't always happen first time round. You just got to keep going. And so,
I've never experienced an audition like my Hamilton audition. I remember being so nervous. And my first audition was at the Umbrella Rooms on the top floor. So I'm not late, but I'm not early. So I'm kind of running up the stairs. I'm trying to get there. And I remember getting to the top floor and I'm out of breath. I'm so tired. I'm sweating. Everything is going crazy. And then someone came out and was like, "Oh, are you ready?" And I was like, Yeah, so kind of just walked in, and it was so lovely because we had well, Lack and Tommy were both at the table. And as soon as I like kind of walked in, they were just waving and just so friendly and so welcoming. So instantly kind of walking into the room, I felt safe and I felt at home in a way. Despite it being my first audition for the show, I kind of felt like I was home. I'd been obsessed with the music because I remember being introduced to the cast album of Hamilton during rehearsals for In the Heights. So again, I kind of went on this frenzy and just, I was obsessed. And I remember listening to the music being like, I want to be John Lawrence. Like, and this is before there was even any talk of the show coming to London, before any of that was being discussed. I just kind of called my agent up and I was like, have you listened to Hamilton? I'm obsessed with it. I would love to one day play John Lawrence and Philip Hamilton. So lost my mind when I'm obviously being called in to audition with that material. So I kind of remember walking in and I just had to take a deep breath. I had all the material in like this plastic sleeve, but I kind of just put it down on the floor and they were like, oh no, you can keep hold of them if you can keep hold of the music and stuff if you want. And I was like, no, I'm okay. I'm good. And I remember just doing the material and the audition just flew by. Like 1 minute I'm walking in, the next minute I'm walking out. And I got some directional things and I was like, okay, cool. I tried to go in as blank as possible in terms of trying to just, whatever kind of direction they gave me, to just try and take that on board. And then left the room. I think I got a call the next day saying that I have an audition the following day. So 2 days after my first audition, I had my second audition. And this time it was back at, it was at Cameron's offices. And I remember going in, and when I went in, there was a camera there filming me. And
oh shit.
Yeah, so this is like August. So August the 4th, I think, was my first audition, and August the 6th, sorry, was my second audition. Camera's there, Tommy's there, Lack is there, and Lack actually got up and was then playing for me. So Lack got up to play for me for the audition. And it was so amazing. Like, again, it just flew by. I had such an incredible time, and the team had taken us to like this little kind of bar thing for us to just have like company drinks. And I got a call from my agent at 11 o'clock at night. Like, I'm kind of like, what's happening? Like, what's going on? Why am I receiving a call so late? And she told me, she was like, where are you? I was like, oh, I'm just having drinks with everyone. Like, we're having company drinks. She was like, oh, cool. She was like, well, can you go somewhere where it's quieter? And I was like, yeah, sure. So all these thoughts are running through my mind. I'm like, I have no idea what's happening right now. I think my agent's about to drop me or something stupid like that. So I go outside, and it's kind of like in the square of where the Crucible Theatre is and all that kind of stuff. And it's pitch black. There's barely anyone outside. And she was like, can you be seen by people? I was like, yeah, my cast are just inside. So she goes, can you go somewhere where no one can see you? So I'm like, okay.
Process.
I'm like, what the heck's going on right now? But it's all because my agent knows me really well. So then I finally get to this little area, like I'm kind of cornered off in like darkness. So I'm trying not to get too into darkness. So in case other people are around or it gets a bit scary, I'm just kind of there by myself. No one's around. And my agent just says to me, you got Hamilton. And I was like, wait, what? So I'm now like, no, what? Don't lie to me. Don't like, I'm being serious. Do not, this is not a joke. Like, you can't be joking with me. And she was like, no, you've been cast. So immediately I'm like, oh my God, I've been cast as like ensemble and I'm going to cover John Lawrence and Philip Hamilton. She's like, no, you've been cast as the role. I think at the time I was the first one to be cast in the show. And I dropped to the ground and was in tears, like hysterically crying. because I never kind of dreamt that is how I would experience that, and I never even dreamt that was something I could be capable of doing.
So I came to watch it, fell in love, and Gabe actually, obviously, you know, Gabriel Makaki got me on stage with me and my friend on stage after, and we had a picture on stage. And then it was literally about 3 weeks after that, I think, or a month after watching that I got the offer through. So that was also crazy, because I'd just seen it, and obviously, you know, it's like, it's one thing listening to the soundtrack of Hamilton, it's another witnessing it of Hamilton. Like, it's like two different entities coming together. So, you know, just seeing it all, it just made me want to be part of it even more.
Preparation can never be like underestimated. But what I'm interested also is like the way you said, when you first listened to it, you were like, I have to play John Lawrence. Like, I have to play this part. There was something in you that said, like, I really want, because you could have said, you know, I want to play Hamilton. You could have said, I want to play Lafayette. You could have said anything. You could have said, I want to play Burr. But you were like, that's the one. That's something about that part, something about that material, that story really resonated with you. And I'm always really interested. I always look for that. If I'm going, you know, and auditioning for something, I'm like, is there something which speaks to me about this part? And then if there is, then great. And you've got something that you're really going to put the work in for. But then the next thing is just like preparation. You just can't be prepared enough. And partly that you kind of know that, everyone kind of knows that, but you have to learn that, don't you? You have to do the things, as you say, where you do the auditions where you don't quite have that, and you're not quite as prepared as you could have been, and you have to learn, actually, I lost that maybe, or I didn't maybe represent myself in the best way that I could have done that experience. And so you learn a little bit more next time. But yeah, it's simple. It's interesting how simple that thing is of like, be as prepared as possible.
Yeah.
Go over that material as much as you can. Have thoughts about it, so that then you can be, as you say, flexible when they say, actually, try it this way or try it that way.
I knew that the show was big, but it never occurred to me that it was like, in terms of how big it was. I don't think I understood until we had started doing performances in front of people. So that in itself was quite an overwhelming thing to experience. But I think one of the things for me that makes it what it is I said it before, in terms of us being a unit and being together and being a family, and the way that the story is told and the way that the story leads itself through this narrative is I think through family and through friendships. And even though you see like divides between Hamilton and Burr, it starts as friendship, and it like there's still realizations of we were friends. There's humanity in it. It's just very, very real and present within this musical theatre world that is so stereotyped as being over the top or big or like explosive and all that kind of stuff. Whereas you just have a show that is just telling the story of people who lived like we live, but through a different narrative, like through a different language of music in a way. So yeah, I think one of the things that makes it what it is just its humanity in a way. Its way of expressing that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing that resonated most with me, I felt like when I was listening to the soundtrack for the first time, when I heard it, I was just like, I've never heard of a musical or a show quite like this. I was really struck with how strong the female characters were. I felt like, like thinking about the time it was written and how quite often at that time women were sort of secondary to men in a way, but to have these really strong female characters really resonated with me. And also just watching it for the first time and seeing people on stage that looked like me, playing central character roles that weren't the classic stereotype that you find in some musicals and other things, was really powerful for me. I think I don't think I'd ever seen such a diverse cast on stage in such a huge musical. And I just will always, you know, the timeline at the start in the first number, Alexander Hamilton, when you have all that cast on stage and you see all those faces and the diversity on it, it's just so powerful. I think, yeah, I think it's a show that people can see themselves in, and I don't think you have more shows like that now for sure, but I think this really set the bar high for that. So I think, yeah, it resonated for me.
It's a story about us, and it's a story about people. It's not kind of like a diversion. It's not like something you consider to take your mind off of life. It's about life. It's about people and how they are, how they interact, friends, brothers, children, mothers, fathers. It's about all of those things, which all great drama is about. And on top of that, it's told with, it's served up in a way which is really accessible. So the music and the melodies are so brilliant. So you can accept it. You can take it on many, many different levels. I don't know if you could pinpoint why anything is sort of universal, then you'd be able to do it all the time. Somehow Lin has been able to go, this is a story that I want to tell, and this is the way in which I want to tell it. And somehow those two things really, really line up so that they resonate with lots of different people. But I remember when I saw it in New York, thinking it just felt, it felt like it was this perfect thing. It almost like wasn't like a piece of theatre, or it wasn't a musical. It was like, it just seemed utterly perfect and fully formed. The music and the acting and the singing and the staging and the choreography all just seemed perfect. I was like, I've never seen anything like that, where it seemed utterly realised. And then, of course, you look at the way that Lin wrote it. And as he spoke about, when we talked to him, of like, okay, you know, you have an idea about something, the melody comes, and then there's the craft of like working on it and 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 honing and crafting and changing and moving, shifting, and all of that stuff. But when I saw it, I was like, well, this seems like it just arrived. It's totally perfectly formed. It seems so perfect. And that was the thing that really moved me most. The story, of course, is moving, but I was like, how has someone come up with this? How has someone, and what must it be like to be an artist? And I remember thinking, wow, it's like, it never happens that as an artist you have something which is just like, bing, just works. And when I sat there, I was like, this seemed like it was just perfectly formed, and it just happened. Of course, that's not the truth.